Okay, we're ready?
Yep.
Hi there. How's everybody doing? How's lunch? Awesome. Good. Excellent. My name is Wes Gamble, and today I'm going to be talking about Tropo, which is a framework that allows you to do telephony in the cloud. There's a cloud, there's a telephone in it.
Nice phone.
End of story.
Yeah, nice phone.
Step one, place telephone in your cloud.
This is
What's
your
that
cloud.
dial
This is
thing
your
on?
phone on the cloud. Any questions?
It's a new smartphone.
Well, the input on the telephone is a little complicated, but we'll cover that in a second. So, this is a inventory slide. My name is Wes Gamble. I am an independent consultant. I've been doing Ruby on Rails web app development for a little over 5 years. I've been doing web development longer than I care to admit. But I do that under the name of Bison Consulting. I'm currently acting as the Chief Technology Officer of a company called Coached, which is a real-time coaching system, which uses Tropo underneath. That's my email address, that's my Twitter handle. So today we're going to talk about why do we care about Tropo, what's it going to do for us, what do they offer. We're going to go through some code examples, and we'll probably talk about a few other things. So let's see if anybody remembers this. Oh, I don't have sound. Oops. And I still don't have sound. Oops. Does anybody remember the Mickey Mouse talking phone commercial from 1981?
Not admitting to it, but
Still have it.
I'm not even. I'm not even telling you I still have one.
It's in my office.
For the rest, do not.
Oh, I turned my sound off. That's why. How do that, Wes?
With the Mickey Mouse talking phone, the battery is not included.
Yeah, thank you.
Oops. Anyway.
With a Mickey Mouse talking phone, you can call 6 different Disney characters. You guessed it, flying Dolphin. Mickey Mouse talking phone from Hasbro's preschool division.
Wow.
So that's why we're interested. Because they want to have cartoon characters over at a party, among other things. So, so telephony's been around. You know, computer telephony's been around for a long time. You know, before, you know, up until recently, let's say, relatively recently, if you want to do telephony integration from your application, you had to buy a big honking server probably. You had to spend a lot of money on it. You also had to spend a lot of money on someone who actually understood some proprietary telephony API. Now, strictly speaking, not so long ago, you know, you can basically buy a decent-sized computer, put some telephony cards in it, and run this thing called Asterisk, which is an open-source telephony server. But running raw Asterisk is still pretty complicated, and you're still having to manage that full stack from hardware all the way up to your application. So the reason that we're interested in something like Tropo is that we basically get that entire stack from them. So we don't have to maintain any of our hardware, and we can just go right to the application. And so this is hopefully one of us. I was thinking about this actually. You're not actually going to see any HTML in this presentation. So what we really mean here is someone who knows languages that tend to be used in web applications. Not so much, I mean, a web developer who wants to integrate into their web app. So why are we interested in Tropo? It's free to develop. So you can get started right now. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't pay until you go to production. Basically, go to your account, you put in your credit card number, and then you start paying.
How do they define production?
That's a good question because all my apps are still running in development mode. I mean, nobody's called me on the phone and said you're using too much time. So,
If you were paying for what you're using now, what would you be paying?
I covered at the end, but it's nominal. It's like a penny per text message and 3 cents per voice minute. And then international stuff depends. So Tropo is actually the offering of a company called Moxeo out of Florida. And they have about 10 years of interactive voice response system experience. And they have a pretty widely deployed infrastructure, especially when you start looking at international stuff. They have a lot of international numbers that you can use, what have you. The big win, I think, when I was looking at products to use for Coached, there's another company called Twilio that does voice and SMS only. And I like the idea that we could expand into doing IM if we wanted to do that. And that's Yahoo, AIM, MSN, who else? Gtalk, AnyJabber. And there's Twitter support, but it's only one way. It's open source, and it's based on something called the Session Initiation Protocol. And to the best of my knowledge, the giant sort of server in the sky that actually makes Tropo work is a big Java server that's using something called SIP servlets, which is JSR something or other. And what it means for us is that it's going to make it easier for us to start integrating telephony into our apps. So that's why we're interested. So language support, APIs are available in JavaScript, which hopefully some of us are doing. Any PHP people? Okay. My beloved Ruby, Python, and Groovy. And actually, when we talk about the web API, there's actually a couple more options.
So it's not Java directly?
No, it's Java on the back end though. And in fact, when you debug applications, you'll see that it's actually running JRuby to do the Ruby stuff on top of the Java.
What's the .NET solution? Was there what are
There's
those
a-
languages?
well, there's a C#. There's a C# upper for the web API, which I will get to. So there's 3 APIs that you get when you start using Tropo. One is called the scripting API. Basically, this just reads a script file either from your server or from Tropo's server, and we'll see how that works. Basically, it just grabs that script file, sucks it in, and executes it, which is great for one-off sorts of apps. But obviously, that script is going to die. So if you want something a little more integrated, you're going to use a web API. So basically, you just have to have a place where Tropo can post to, and then there are well-defined interaction between you and Tropo in your web application. Excuse me. And then they have this thing called the REST API, which you will always use if you want to do an outbound call with Tropo. So that's this session. The session initiation API is how you do outbound calls. And then there's provisioning, which basically lets you programmatically do anything. You're going to see in the Tropo website how we configure the application. The provisioning API lets you do any of that programmatically. And then also, they have sort of a generic event handling system, and you can basically send signals to your apps that are running programmatically with an HTTP call.
You need things like ringing and
Yeah, or it's more to interrupt something generally, but yeah.
Pressing buttons on the keypad.
No, this is like you already have an app that's running, and you're trying to control it just by issuing HTTP requests. And so you say, tell it to stop playing, and if it's in the middle of playing something, it'll stop.
But I thought Tropo was better than Twilio because you get all the low-level events and you can do a full IVR.
Yeah,
you
you
run
can,
an IVR
yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but get every key press, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
listening to something and they press something. and stop.
That's not what that is. It's something else. Okay, so getting started. So you make an account, you create your application. When you create the application, it's going to ask you if you want it to be a script or the web API. And if it's a script, then you have to decide whether you're going to let them host it. And they literally just give you a window, you just paste code into it and save it. Or if it's a web API, then you have to give it the URL that it's going to call back to. And then if you want to have phone numbers, by default, you don't get phone numbers up front. You can basically just ask for phone numbers, and you can ask for those in any area code that you want them, more or less. So this first demo I'm going to do, by the way, so I've created an account on Tropo for all of us. It's username HCC demo and password HCC demo. So basically, I'm just gonna, I think we'll be able to hear my phone. So what this is all it is we basically call in and it asks us if we want to know how long it's going to be until the world ends in 2012, which apparently is December 21st. Does anybody know why that is? I don't know.
Oh, we all voted.
Yeah.
It was a poll.
Yeah.
Maybe that's when it's gonna end for
That's
you.
I mean, the winter solstice. Oh, we need to take that into consideration.
We have some
We need to
Aztec
meet
guy.
again and decide.
Is there some Aztec guy that
Does anybody have anything to do after the
Incan?
21st?
Incan? Yeah. What? Maybe he was wrong.
Oh, we'll see you on the 22nd.
Can you hear it?
I don't hear it.
That was actually wrong. It didn't ask us anything. Didn't ask if we want to know. But I think I have a volume down too low. Yes.
That's awesome.
Oh, sorry. Shit, I picked you up. Yeah. Yes. You don't. Yeah, it did. Well. Oh, actually, I think it thinks I said Eastern. So anyway, the point here is that, you know, that was all being run by RubyScript on the back end. And it's pretty straightforward. So I want to show you how that works. The code's up there on GitHub under, I made a project for all these demos. So this is literally a copy of, the script that you get from Tropo. So you can go right now. Can you see that okay?
Be bigger.
You see it right? A little bit?
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go, there you go.
Better?
Just tell me.
All right, so I'm not going to go through this in agonizing detail, but there's some things I want you to notice. So the first thing is this Simon voice. That's some British guy. He sounded like a British guy, right? So you get your choice of voices with this stuff. You have about 60 to choose from. And this is just a bunch of crazy data that's set up for this app. You know, this ridiculous hash of like 1,000 area codes and which time zone they map to. And bunch of time zone data. These default options here, these are used to sort of aggregate options when you ask a question. There are certain options that you are likely to use more than once. So what this is telling us is that whenever we ask a question, the person gets 2 chances to answer correctly. They get 15 seconds per attempt. It uses that voice, which we defined above. And then this is just basically an anonymous function that says when you give a bad choice, the first time it's going to say, sorry, I didn't catch that, this time in English. Second time it's going to say, sorry, I still don't understand, and it's going to hang up the call.
Please give up. Or something.
What's that?
Please what is it? Please give up? Is that what?
You said
Please
something
give us a
about-
call back.
If you're still alive.
I didn't want to tell you anyway.
So, and then here, the next one is what happens if the call just times out. So that's if you basically don't answer for the 15 seconds that we gave you. Okay, so these events are being, you know, you're just giving Tropo handlers for the events that it's handling on your behalf. So the way to think about this is really, you know, the script is just giving Tropo an entire set of directives to handle the conversation, to handle the entire conversation. So everything has to sort of be set up in advance, right? And then this code just getting called if it needs to be called. So this is the method to calculate how much time there is. This is the code that tries to figure out your time zone. Now, if somebody wants to text it, you can do this with SMS, and what will happen is it won't be able to detect your time zone because it's not a phone call. It doesn't see it as a call. Although it still should be able to see the area code. But anyway, but you can do this exact same thing via SMS. But there are, we'll talk about that later. There are some subtle differences between how it gets handled. But basically, this is where it starts, right? So we call in. It says countdown to 2012 activated. Do you want to know how long you have till the disaster strikes? We said yeah, and then tried to figure out our time zone. And then it basically it tells us how long it's going to be. And then it goes into this loop where it says, do you want to hear it using a different time zone? And if we say yes, it says okay then, and then it drops down here and asks us which time zone we want, and then it just redoes a calculation and retells us. So so it's pretty simple. Obviously this is just like it's just a standalone script, right? So you can imagine if this got much more complicated, you would probably want to do something, you would want to refactor that a little bit.
I noticed you had spelled out Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. Yeah, so yeah, I noticed that too when I first saw it, and I guess the text to speech doesn't handle two eyes really well. So yeah,
Nice.
I'm glad you noticed that. So I just want to talk again. Just want to make sure we're clear on how you receive inbound calls. So this means this is from Tropo's point of view, receiving an inbound call. Okay. So you have Tropo, you have your script, you have your person, and that asterisk below the scripting API. The script is running on Tropo. So, but think of this is more of a logical diagram than a physical one necessarily, because when you have a web app, this is exactly how it works. So, I call the phone number, and that's hooked up to my Tropo application, and then Tropo makes a call back to my script. So let me just show you real quick how that looks on the Tropo side. So, I already logged in under this HTC demo account. And I have 3 applications here. So this is the first one we did. It's called Demo 1. And these, it basically allows you to have a different script for voice or text, which you don't necessarily need. The differences aren't that great. It's not that hard to handle both cases in one application, but you have that option. So, and then here, by default, you don't get this voice number, so you do have to ask for that. So I had to go through the process of clicking on this, and then if you do that, you basically get to choose an area code, you pick whatever you want, and add a phone number. Okay, so I already did that. And then you get this Skype voice. I forgot to mention Skype. So this Skype voice number, if you're doing at the lower level, if you're doing this SIP protocol, you know what you're doing, you can use this. I don't offhand remember what INUM is. Does anybody know? I don't know offhand. Photo is another offering that I'll mention later. They're trying to simplify it. So they have a couple other offerings where I think they're trying to simplify this a great deal. And then down here, these are the tokens that you use to make outbound calls, and we'll talk about that in a little while. And then here's where you would configure all your instant message accounts. So, assuming you had created an AIM account with a username and a password and a nickname, then you could put this in there, and when this application, basically this immediately just starts up that account and just sits there and listens. Okay, so that's what it looks like on the Tropo server. And just to give you a sense of how easy it is to make one of these, I mean, it's literally like, I would like to make a new scripting app. I would like to do a sample application. And then I can pick one of these. So this is literally the demo we just saw. Okay. So it's pretty simple. Okay. Is that clear? All right. Let's get through that. Okay. So a couple things to sort of take away from this. So this is just a script, you know, there's nothing, it's just gonna get executed top to bottom. Basically the API is really just a DSL. It emits JSON for consumption by the Tropo server. So really, most of these language libraries are just wrappers that are emitting JSON for you and giving you convenience methods to do that. Some of the more important things that we're gonna talk about, say, ask, call, hang up, message. So these are the most common things that you're gonna use when you write an app like this. So as soon as a call comes in, it starts running the script, because I'm basically doing the callback like we saw in the web page there. It's just going to call that Ruby script, right? The ask keyword is synchronous. So we had a thing where we said ask string, and that's the question we're asking. It's blocking until the user responds to that question or it times out. We're obviously doing voice recognition on input. We're doing text-to-speech on output. And we can do this with voice or SMS or other text-based, you know, IM or whatever.
Can you only do text-to-speech, or can you have like an audio file?
We're gonna do an audio file later. So actually, when I went to do the second demo, which is very simple, it's just an outbound, basically an outbound version of that where it's gonna call us. I ran into this. So when you do the Ruby script, it automatically sets this constant called $current call, and that basically has all the metadata about the call that you're currently servicing. So you get the caller ID, you get the channel. Channel here is going to be voice. Network is going to be SIP, SIP. And then you can look at this URL to find out more about all the details about the current call object. So, say, this is literally just, you know, say something to the user. This is just a fixed thing. Some of the options it takes, which voice to use. Like I said, there's 60 different voices. They're sort of distributed across nations and at least one example of either sex. You can give it another option to tell it how to say something if it's not necessarily clear. So when it encounters it, it knows how to speak it. Ask is the next step up from say. So this is say something and then wait for a response. Ask the user question. You block while you wait for the result. Some of the options on that are how many times do they get to try to give you a good answer. What are the good answers? So you do need to define, you know, what's a reasonable piece of input. And generally speaking, this is a grammar. In our case, you know, the allowable choices for that demo were like yes and no. Or I could have pressed 1 or 2 and a keypad. But this can get as complicated as you want. And then all these on whatever options are basically event handlers for different events. So there's a timeout event, there's bad input, it's a call. So this is when I want to do it, when I actually want to initiate a conversation, I want to call it out. So this string you pass it is a phone number. I'm pretty sure the country code is required. Those P's are pauses. So if you were calling another automated system of some sort and you wanted to make it pause before it actually, you know, basically simulated pressing other numbers, you could do that. So this makes an outbound call after you do a session initiation with the REST API, which is really kind of a grand hack, ultimately. But you can do pauses. Some of the options on this are voice or text. So again, this is all the same API regardless of how you're talking to the end user. Network, so if it's voice, it's probably going to be SIP. If it's text, it could be GTalk, it could be Jabber, it could be AIM, it could be Yahoo, whatever's supported. And again, you know, event handlers for the call method. Hang up. What does everybody think this does?
Call somebody.
Yeah, close. It's like that, but the exact opposite. Yeah, so this literally is, there's no options to it. It's the simplest API call ever. It just hangs up. Message. So if you want to send an arbitrary message to someone at some point, this is basically the equivalent of a call. a call, a say, and a hang up. So in this case, we're saying howdy to a user on Yahoo named Homeboy987.
Yahoo Messenger?
Yes. Yeah, sorry. So it's text, and then you know it's IM because it's text, and you know it's Yahoo because it's Yahoo. And again, channel, network, and then in this one you do have to obviously you have to tell it who to send it to. So
Just tell me, you
Yeah.
don't send emails through this? If you
No.
put email there, it wouldn't send something to Yahoo email.
They don't handle Twitter outbound unlike that either, yet, which
I don't think so. Yeah.
seems like it would be natural.
Seems like they would have added some, like,
Yeah.
a few other things, so you're not bouncing between sides all the time.
So basically, you know, there's an event model here because there are certain events that we need to handle in telephony apps. On an ask, you know, examples are what happens if you give me a bad choice, or what happens when you give me a good choice. When you do a call, what happens when they answer? Does anything need to happen when they answer? Does anything need to happen when they hang up? And then there's this notion of signals, again, which are sort of generic interrupts. I mean, these events are within the purview of signals, but you can configure any of these to accept signals from outside, and then you would use the REST API to send those signals to them if you wanted to do that. I have not done any of that. So, making outbound calls. So, the way that we kick off an outbound call is we actually simulate an inbound call. We ask Tropo to simulate an inbound call to us. So I'll explain that in a second. It's kind of a hack, but it works.
Would you say this is like a defect in the API, or this is like an incredible win that becomes apparent as you use it?
Well, I'll show you how it works, and then you can decide what you think. So this can be either programmatic or on demand. So I'll show you the on demand. It's an HTTP call. So we're making an HTTP call to a well-defined URL that Tropo gives us, and we'll see how that works. So this is the URL. So basically, you call this URL. You're basically saying, create me a session, and you pass it one of those tokens that we saw on the website. So either a voice or text token. And the reason that there's two tokens is because you have those two URLs. But if they're the same URL, it kind of doesn't matter which token you use, as far as I know. And then you can pass custom data here. So basically, anything that you pass here on this, in this URL, is just going to get passed through to your script. So, obviously, if you're making an outbound call, you might need it to be at least reasonably dynamic. If you want to call a person by name or whatever. So let me draw a picture. It'll be a little easier. So we got Tropo, we got our script, we got our person, and then we have an HTTP client, which is either a button on the Tropo website or a program that we wrote to do an HTTP call. So we make that call, and I showed you the URL. It can be a get like that, or it could be a post if you don't like doing a get. It calls back to our script. So now our script hears that call as though someone called in, and then our script says, oh, issue the call command. And then it turns around and calls the user. So that's how you do outbound calls with Tropo.
Again, go through that one more time for me. Say the exact same thing again.
Okay, so if I want to make an outbound call with Tropo, I have to have my application ready to do the outbound call. So, and I can show you that in actual code later, but basically I issue a get, we'll say it's a get to that sessions URL that I showed you. Okay. Tropo receives that and says, oh, you want to start a session, and you gave me this token so I know which app you're talking about, so then it calls my app. Now my app has to be ready to say, oh, I just got this packet that says create a session. So my app has to be able to, say, oh, you want me to create a session, I'm going to make a call. And honestly, I think you have to sort of pass the number. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else you would do that, but I pass like 6 things when I do it. And then your script basically has what it needs to send the call back to Tropo, and then Tropo calls me. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the difference between HTTP client and script or app? Are those the same piece of code, same
No.
server? What?
Not necessarily. I mean, it could be. I mean, in my case, I mean, it's all running on the same app.
Okay.
So I have a method that basically issues an HTTP call to Tropo that says, "Start me a session," and then there's other parts of the app that respond, that act as an application. But they don't have to be the same. I mean,
Okay, but the script or app is also an HTTP client. Callback and call JSON are going over HTTP?
yeah, this just
okay.
literally means anything that can issue an HTTP call.
Okay.
It could be a browser, it could be a program, right? So I mean a generic HTTP client. I don't mean, I do mean a program. I mean, unless you're going to sit there and like hit a button every time you want to call somebody. But,
Is it over straight HTTP or does it use?
it can do secure. I haven't yet, but it does have to be a valid cert. It can't be like a self-signed cert. So, and that brings us to our second demo. So maybe this will clear things up. So,
That's a very depressing demo.
well,
It's a rough world out there.
So
You've got 480
Yeah, 400
days.
some days. I mean, that's
Until today, I didn't realize the world is coming to an end
Yeah.
on a specific day.
right.
I'd have
So-
been avoiding
I
that
knew that.
movie.
It's just
I
4
didn't
million
see
years.
that movie yet, but this
The
exactly.
movie's terrible. It's not gonna end like that at all. Really, it's not.
I already forgot about the movie. It's
So if
fine.
I know your outbound call URL, I can trigger your app to make calls.
If you know my token,
Yeah.
so you should be guarding these. These are important.
How long do the tokens last?
Mine have not expired. I don't know that they have an expiration.
Wow.
Take a picture.
Right, right.
Oh wait, it's dot dot dot, isn't it? That's
Yeah, it's
It's okay, it'll be in
even,
the video.
it's even longer than
Yeah,
this,
it'll
so
be in
it's
the
more
video.
specific.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so we're actually going to use the Tropo website as our HTTP client, right? So I can basically just click on this guy, and the script is hard coded.
There's the whole thing.
Yeah, the script is hard coded to call me. What's that?
But it's only in development mode. They're not paying for it anyway.
Right.
Share the wealth.
Right. So, basically, if I click this button, and I think actually, if you look at, you can't really see it, but that URL is the, api.tropo.com
Oh.
sessions URL. So it's all the same. So if I hit this, it's sending the request, and then I should get a phone call, and then it's basically going to be the same thing, but it's going to be from them.
Okay. You're gonna call yourself.
Yes,
Okay.
well, Tropo's going to call me.
But you told me.
See, HCC demo 2. So,
Nice.
Countdown to 2012 activation. You want to know how long you have before 2000 strikes?
I didn't hear the phone ring.
oh, because it's on Reddit.
Come on.
Not bad.
Come on. You're killing us. Let's try it again.
Sometimes it doesn't sound so bad when it's said in a British accent.
I don't know. Yeah, you're about to die. Yeah, it's all right. So the difference between the little bigger. Yeah. Oops. So the only real differences here, this is a very minor difference, but when I just took this through the call command in, and it failed because there's no current call because there's no call. So I had to put that in to guard that, and then I literally just called, this is my phone number. If you it's up on the internet, call me. So that's it. So that's the difference between an inbound and outbound call. So, any questions about that?
Well, I was interested.
How do you feel, Lester? What do you think?
You can specify the caller ID also.
They may have been in
Are you
business for
telling me
10
that?
years.
No,
but
I saw it on there.
Their API
Let's
is
look at that.
very odd.
That was something Mike just brought up.
I mean,
Really tell. Who's calling?
It seems like the first thing you do is wrap
Specify
that
a
so it
different
actually
caller
just,
ID than
you
what
make
the
a
outbound-
call and
what
it's
the phone
done.
number was.
And hide their kind of
It's
weird.
valuable.
It's very
Is there
valuable.
something special you can do, you couldn't do with just a call API directly?
I don't know.
Hey, Wes, take us back to the code. This gentleman brought up what I wanted to know.
Sure. Yeah.
So for every call you have to use
Let's
a
get up there
token?
and call
I
our
saw that, yeah, nice.
What?
We're looking at your caller ID there.
Yeah, oh, so this is just me being nice. If I didn't do that, it would come in as unknown, but that was me. This is the number,
Yeah.
that's the number from the app, right?
Could it
So,
stick any number there?
Could have said go die, right?
I could.
I, you.
But that's
oh,
not
I-
Tropo specific, like any telephony app, right?
Can do
You
that. Okay,
Asterisk, good, yeah.
nice. Okay.
You guys are already calculating your.
Hey, you know, hey, I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
So the,
Hey, politics can get dirty.
to make a call,
Yeah.
you say, do the get rid of post, and then it returns some token.
No, you call it with the token. You get the token.
That's,
So you
Are
make
you
the app,
happy?
you get the token. You have
Can we,
tokens.
can we see that diagram again?
Sure.
Oh, very good.
The way I'm thinking of it is, you tell it that you wanna make a call, and it sends back to you and says,
I was kinda
okay,
hoping it
make a
wasn't.
call. Now
Just
what?
because it's
Right.
dirty.
No,
doesn't
but
mean
it-
that
but
guy
it-
lives-
but it hasn't started the call yet, it just
Yeah,
sort of
well,
set
that's-
some.
What's the right side of the wall?
Right.
Oh, you guys see them?
Okay, so I send the URL.
Okay, a URL,
So
which
all
has
this,
your
all this
token
says
in
is
it?
like, it says, Tropo, here's my token, please start me a session.
Uh-huh.
Like, meaning, start a session from you.
Okay, and is that, okay, then let me
There's
see
so
the
many
next
ways
part.
to do it.
What's that?
Without.
Keep going.
Yeah, so then it calls
But
my
then
script.
it's-
Okay.
My script needs to be ready to do a call.
Okay.
I mean, if my script does have to detect that that's the message I got from Tropo, right? So it's basically saying, create a session, which means in our parlance, my app is gonna
I
call
love
it.
it too, but I don't know.
And then the
And
JSON.
then I send back the call command.
I don't know. It might not agree with that.
Okay, now-
And then after this, it's the same as before, like, you're talking and Tropo is mediating that conversation with your app.
I got that. So, the next call, you have to do everything the same over again. You have to either get the post, set it up, and it doesn't start until you do the call.
Right.
The call in JSON.
Correct.
Okay, so now, is there a big delay? Like you might want to set up the get post, and then because it takes 5 or 10 seconds, and then you can call instantly when you do the call, and it just waits for something to happen.
You mean like a call queue? Where
Yeah,
I would
for
like activate the call? Nothing.
The function looks exactly the same. Like your app has to know the token when it does the get post. So why can't the token go in the call, and everything just happens at once? What's the point? There's
It doesn't,
I'm missing
the way,
point.
the token is so that it knows which application to talk to.
It's the one that sent it, the call in
No,
JSON.
no, there's, no. I have to tell Tropo, I'm talking to Tropo, right? Tropo's
Uh-huh.
there. And I say, here, please start a session. And it's like, well, I don't know what app you're talking about. So I give it the token, and the token is assigned to my application. And that's how it looks up the application to talk to.
But the okay, is that going to be the same token every time that app starts?
Yes.
Okay, so the token can be stored in the app, and it can be included in the call in JSON.
Yeah,
So what
my
I
token is in a
must-
configuration file, and then I use REST client.
So
to call
Tropos,
Tropo.
so I don't think that's, I'm not following why that's the reason.
Okay, well,
for the
here's,
get post, but
well, let's talk about an inbound call. When you do an inbound call, the way that Tropo knows what application you talk to is you call the phone number. So that's the token, right? It's the same thing. It's just that now the user is not initiating anything, so the user can't provide the token implicitly like it does with the phone calls, right? So I need a way to tell Tropo which application to use to make the call to the user. Does that make sense?
But since the application is making the call, anyway. From a complication standpoint, making an outbound call is like super trivial
Well, like I said,
compared to making an inbound call. Because an inbound call is like an external event. I have no idea who it connects with. I've got to pre-recorded the caller ID
Sure.
and how to route the call and who's calling and blah blah. Well, an
I
outbound
mean-
call is like a phone number.
Right.
Do it. You know who just gave it to you, this IP address. Maybe you have to leave a token on how you
Well,
get
no,
back to me.
and it's valid. I mean, when I first found out about that, I thought it was hacky, and then I forgot about it because it started working. So,
I get. There seems like there must be some reason that we just the setup time?
I
I
will
noticed the
ask.
setup time is like several.
I know a
5
guy, and I
seconds
will
or
ask him.
something.
Okay. So, the things that we need to take away from this, we're basically doing the same thing as we do with an inbound call, effectively. We're simulating an inbound call in order to get Tropo to talk to our app. You do that with voice or SMS, current call doesn't get populated. So, there's a lot of internationalization support. The most exciting thing about this slide is that internationalization fits on it. Cool. Voice recognition, when you do an ask, you can give it an optional recognizer parameter that says, you should expect a Brazilian Portuguese person to be talking to you. And then, it will do it'll do voice recognition on that. And there's all sorts of detail on that at that URL.
What if you're stuttering Portuguese?
That's true. There's
Yeah, what if I stutter?
starting module, $500.
Yeah.
Costs a lot.
Okay.
So
I can, as a developer, I can like be hitting on Brazilian women, like and
I knew-
asking for
I
dates
knew we were
and
gonna figure out a way to
just
take
automate it
to
until
pick up
somebody
the difference.
replies and
That's
it's
why we're here,
Portuguese,
really.
and then they know her phone number. Anyway, go ahead.
Text to speech output. Again, this is just the accent. It's more if you provided Spanish and you give it a Spanish voice, it should sound pretty close to right. If I give it a Spanish voice and I give it English, it says ayo, it doesn't say hello. So it is smart enough to know how to say some things. And there's lots and lots of international numbers because like I said, it's been around for a long time.
Which just means a lot of local calls, not a long distance call. You can make a local, you can
Yeah.
call somebody in Germany as a local charge.
Right. Additional things you can do, you can record calls and generate transcriptions up to 2 hours. You can transfer calls, you can do conference calling, and you can play audio files. And you can also host those on Tropo or wherever.
Is it maybe 2 hours per call or?
2 hours per call. You can reject calls.
Maybe that whole setup thing is to support the conference calling. It makes no sense in the individual call, but suddenly in a conference call, they call people if you have to let them join or something.
Not exactly, because the conference, I don't think so. Actually, it's
But you
interesting
could-
you say that because because you issue the conference command, you just say conference's phone number. And
How's that different from making an outbound call?
that's a good question.
What's that?
And then you can do kind of arbitrarily complex grammars. I forgot what SRGS is. I think GRXML is like grammar XML. I assume it's an XML that you use to specify grammar. But these things can be much more complicated than just yes and no. Some things to realize about voice versus text. The way that if you get an inbound call, there's a channel attribute that you're going to get from Tropo that's going to tell you whether it's voice or text. And then if it's text, you would probably inspect the network. Well, you might not care actually, but it'll tell you if it came from Yahoo or AIM or whatever. On the text channel, when you get that first call in, you're going to get a new session object, and you're going to have this attribute called initial text. That initial text, and this actually was something that tripped me up for a little while. So if your application, if the first thing your application does is ask a question, and somebody calls you, Tropo doesn't have any way of knowing whether you want to use, they don't know if I said, Ty, please call me with the number 5, right? And then I need that 5 for something, or I need that input. Or if I just said, Ty, just text me whatever, and then we start having conversation. So in my case, I didn't really care about what was getting texted in. So I was letting arbitrary input come in. And when you do that, you have to throw away that first piece of text, or it will be applied to your first question. So what you do is you issue blank ask. You say ask with an empty string, and then basically that inbound text gets treated as a result of that ask, and then you immediately just ask your first question. So I text whatever, and then the conversation starts like that. Is that clear? It's a little weird, And I complained about it, and you know, they were like, well, we don't know if you want that first answer, you might. And if you do, then you don't have to do this, and you just start. So, that takes us to our next demo. And I'll go ahead and put the code up while we're looking at it, or while we're doing it. It's pretty straightforward.
This is gonna be a doomsday conference call?
No. No. So.
Bend over and kiss your ass goodbye.
Actually, I need people to volunteer. So somebody call Sammy. Would you call that number?
Sure thing.
And when it asks you what you want to do, you're going to pick one for conference. And who wants to be the other person? Somebody far away.
Can you do, when you're doing text, can you do like full back and forth conversations, or is it?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, so stay. So now somebody else call that number and answer one.
Oh.
When it asks you. Okay, so now you guys should be able to talk to each other on the phone. Oh, after.
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Yeah, so, I mean, basically we just connected.
So can you have the conference, is the conference app running?
Hold on, I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
So that like, you could overhear some specific keywords in the conversation and then moderator can come on or whatever?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you could detect, oh, that's a good question. I don't know, I haven't gotten that far with it. I just got the calls to connect. You're asking if I can inspect the streams, basically?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Maybe not that,
I don't
but
think so.
I think it's probably gonna end up being a separate.
Yeah.
What
Because
if you wanted
you were
to
saying,
I mean,
like,
it's
I could
basically
say
just-
we're blocking.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically just kicking off multiple threads, and then whenever you guys are saying something, it knows to like send that stuff.
Okay.
But you could record the whole thing.
You could record it, yeah. Part of it.
So you can access this conference either through calling a phone number or possibly even through Skype,
Mm-hmm.
right? The same conference, you could have people on Skype and on the
Yeah,
phone.
yeah, so the conference is.
Are there any other
an object that's up
audio
there.
streams you can attach to? Is there like an RTMP stream or anything that you could attach to? Do you know?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I was wanting to run like a D&D game with my Tropo app as the dungeon master and have everybody call in as players. That's what I was kind of thinking.
Yeah. So for the second one, there's a transfer. I'm going to try and edit this file. Yeah, exactly. So what sucks is you click this down here and the box shows up here.
Me hanging up.
Okay. So now when I did this yesterday and changed the phone number, it would not forget the phone number that I tested with before. And this friend of mine was in a bar, and he was like, "Well, hello," and I was like, "Yeah, remember when I was testing that with you? It called you." So, but I have a workaround if it doesn't work. So.
Okay. Is he still in the bar?
What's that? Does somebody want to give me their phone number, please?
No.
Well, actually, you know what? That's cool.
I'll give you Mike's number.
No, that's cool.
Remember, it's going on the video, so people will be calling you the rest.
That's true.
That
That's true.
phone number's on.
Well, that's my phone number, so you know, if you want to give me a call, feel free.
Mike wants his phone number out there.
Oh, and the other thing that kind of sucks is that when you click this button, you see that little bloop, and then it doesn't close the window. So then you're like, oh, did I save it? You did, but you don't realize it. So what I need someone to do is call this number again. and choose number 2 when I ask you. And do it very quietly, or it will like, it'll jump.
Install.
Do it quietly. Or don't talk while it's.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't set it up so.
If you say the word "to," would it also do it? Is that kind of?
Probably. If it doesn't do it implicitly, you can tell it.
2?
Yeah, and then it's gonna transfer the call to me. I hope.
Still in vibrate?
6 was the last?
8274. Oh, what did it say?
6 were the last.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Hello?
Yep.
Okay.
That was you in the bar.
Woohoo! All right.
For his next trick.
And that's it. Yeah. And then.
It's really nice phones on vibrate. Just take my word for it.
Okay, and then for the last thing, I'm going to show you the audio file. This sounded terrible yesterday, and I asked them about it, and they said that they had some trouble with MP3 decoding, and so I don't know. The truth is, I don't know when that occurred, so I don't know if it got better magically or not. But
Welcome to Demo 3. Press 1 for conference.
and then
The phone is late, so they might be dying now.
and then yeah, something like
That sounds bad.
It sounds like you recorded it at a concert.
that. Yeah.
It's live.
Well, it is actually a live MP3, but it sounds a lot better on the computer. All that stuff in the beginning was part of the recording, but this still doesn't sound like great. But is it
There's too
MP3
much
file?
clicking or something? Or is it just
Yeah.
bad decoding?
Like I said, I asked about it. He said they had some trouble yesterday with the decoding of the MP3. So
I thought their entire reason for existence is that their infrastructure is rock solid, so you don't have to maintain your own. And then suddenly MP3 decoding goes
yeah,
bad.
you might not be typically
well, maybe
you're
I'm
probably
not
playing
playing
a
a
voice
David
file,
Giant
not
song, and I'm just
music.
playing
Yeah.
like a beat,
Bingo.
or something.
Yeah.
Telephone.
Because the voice wouldn't need to be as high quality as the music.
Yeah,
Alright.
bandwidth is a lot lower on voice.
So real quick, I just want to go through how this works.
But that makes it even easier, because the phone only transmits 8K or something.
And that's why it sounds like that.
You sound like 8K.
All right. So the voice we're using here
I
is
could hear what it was bad about that.
the voice we're using. Well, if you heard it on the computer,
But-
you would be able to tell.
Oh, so you've never heard it well on the phone? Maybe that's just
No.
the characteristic of the phone.
It could be. It's like 10 months old. The voice we're using is Vanessa, which is an American female. This stuff is basically all the same. This is our grammar for the choices. It's real simple. It's either 1, 2, or 3. So if I don't put in a 1, 2, or a 3, it's going to say bad choice, please try again. If I make a wrong choice again, it's going to say, dude, really, it's 1, 2, or 3, and it's going to hang up. It's kind of a snotty app, but anyway, so we ask this question, we say press 1 for conference, 2 for transfer, 3 for audio. Then we have this lovely case statement. So the conference here, what happens is, in order to do a conference, you do have to issue a say, and then you just issue this conference command, and you give it a name. So, and then anybody, the way that you guys connected to the same conference was by name, basically. But everybody's just connecting to the same conference because it's hard-coded, but obviously that doesn't have to be. This terminator, if you had hit an asterisk, it would have ended the call or would have taken you out of conference. Play tones basically says if you push buttons on the phone that it'll echo those. And actually what would have happened is if you pressed anything, it would have said disconnected, which is a little, it's kind of hokey, but. And then when you.
And then actually disconnects?
And
or
when
just
you,
says
well,
it?
if you terminate, then it'll say thanks for using, and then if you just hang up, you just hang up, right? But if you hit the star, theoretically, I would say press star to disconnect, and if you did that, then it would issue that say.
Would
So
you
the
have to
conference-
issue a hang-up statement at that point too, or is
Hang
it?
up's
Yeah,
at the bottom.
Terminate.
We always hang
I
up. No, at
understand.
the bottom we
Okay.
always hang up. So
So if we hit a 1, it'll say, welcome to the demo, and if at that point I hit any other key other than star, it would say disconnecting, but then do nothing?
no,
Other
that
than say
disconnecting is
disconnect?
attached to the conference. So it's an event on the conference. So you have to be in the conference for that code to get called.
I'm just trying to understand, the on-choice option, the Lambda just basically says something, but it doesn't actually do anything other than say that.
Correct.
That's- So it's sort of a fake, because it doesn't really disconnect you when it says that.
Right, it's correct, it is very misleading. So, when you do a transfer, here I took the phone number out to protect the innocent. And then it says about to transfer this call, and it transfers it, and now your call is that you're not talking to that person. And this is, you wanna play audio, it's just the same as a say, you just give it a URL to that file. And that has to be a completely, fully qualified URL, so. Okay, so.
Can you change the voice in BidScript? Or is it set voice?
No, you can, because it's an option on the, it's an option on the.
So essentially you can have
What's that?
a 60 voice sex line with Tropo.
You could, if people are really into talking to other people, which I'm sure there's gotta be a name for that. Can somebody find that while we're talking? That's a, wow.
What else is technology for?
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so now we're gonna talk about the web API, which is, I've never done any of the scripting, honestly, so all the scripting stuff I learned this week. So the web API, it's effectively the same commands. There are some nuances about how it works. But basically, this is just Tropo issuing a post to your web application every time it needs to talk back to you. So, when I say that you specify the initial call in the app setup, so we're going to see that it's not necessarily the same URL. So you can actually make it, you can actually send it on to a different URL and hence a different action on the back end if you want. So my example code is a Rails app. Actually, the way that my application is I actually have three applications now that are clients to one application that's controlling, I call it my bot, right? So this one Rails application its only job is to interact with Tropo. And then I have clients to it that basically talk to that app to get the ability to have a conversation with the end user. So that app doesn't necessarily have to be a Rails app, right? Because that's kind of heavy. That could be Sinatra, it could be Node, it could be anything, as long as it can be posted to. Right? So that's what that says. As long as I'm giving Tropo back the JSON they want, it can be whatever. So there's API helpers for all those languages I previously mentioned. There's a Node. Now I just pulled this off of GitHub, so I can't attest to the quality of these. I think these are all contributed. Maybe the C# one isn't. I don't know. And Grails is like a Grails plugin, and I don't know enough about Grails to know what a Grails plugin is. But and then there's an Erlang one, which I thought was interesting, but I didn't look at any of these. So, and basically, I'm assuming this based on the Ruby one. It's really just wrappers that generate the JSON that Tropo understands. So, why do we do this instead of having a script? We might want to store a bunch of state in a database and read a bunch of stuff out of a database, and we already have everything set up to do that. And again, when you do the outbound call, when you issue that command to Tropo and post it back to the application, if you add additional parameters to that get or post, those are passed into your application as though they were like an array of parameters from a form named parameters, and then you can parse that and do whatever you want with it. And also, this is one of the things that kind of bugs me about Tropo is the package, the payload you get from when you start a new session or when you're like in the middle of a conversation just getting the answer to a question is different. So I end up writing a lot of code, a lot of code I guess, but I wrote a lot of convenience stuff on top of the Tropo Web API just because I didn't want a bunch of code that was like inspecting whether there was a session, it was a session hash or a result hash, whatever. So I've already complained to them that I'd like to see the API become more unified. So the event model is slightly different. Every request so when Tropo posts to your web app, it expects to be told what URL is the next one to go to the next time it comes back. So generally speaking, right, we're talking about having a conversation. So first I come in, I establish the call, whether that's inbound or outbound. And then, I have to tell it basically the next time when it gets a response to a question I ask, where should it post to? And I have to provide that to it. And that's what we do with this on object. So this is not something that's in the scripting API. You have to tell it that basically there's a continue event. The continue event just means everything went fine, but it's in your script. So again, remember, in your app. So again, remember, for every interaction you have with Tropo, you're basically like giving it directives to tell it like what to do next. So you come in with a call and I ask you a question, I do a bunch of stuff. At some point I need to say on continue, whatever, and then that gets sent back in JSON to Tropo, and Tropo says, oh, if everything goes right, then I'm going to go to this URL, okay? And then timeout, and there's other events. So, like you might start with a URL called start URL, then you might have a URL called process answer URL. And if you're me, you might set it up so that that process answer URL is generic and you're basically just always using it over and over. But you can do whatever you want. Yeah.
Do you define those events, or are they defined for you?
They're defined for you. I don't think. I don't think.
Well, I was thinking because if they press 1, like event press 1, so basically you could tell it if you've got 3 different resources, right, and one corresponds to resource 1, you could actually have the different URLs and keep your Rails app, all the rest RESTful, rather than trying to, like you had said that you've got one that just interacts with Tropo.
Mm-hmm.
If you could define the events and send it to them, and then it could just interact straight with your app. I'm thinking.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you talking about not having to have like an if statement, or are you talking about?
Well, okay, so say I call my app and I'll push 1 to do something with a list, and push 2 to do something with some other resource.
Right.
Well, if my event is 1,
instead of having to go through a dispatch, instead of having to dispatch.
right? So I could just tell it based on which event.
Yeah.
If I define the events, I could do different roles straight to mine.
Right. Yeah, so basically what you want is basically push a rule engine into Tropo and say, if depending on which result you hear, go here, right? No, it's not like, I mean, that may be something that's coming, I don't know, but it's way lower level than that, right? Like you have to hear the result and then interpret it.
Okay.
You can't tell it to interpret it. The only way you can tell it to interpret the result is to distinguish between a good and bad choice, to tell it how many times to ask, all that stuff. So you are getting sort of some validation up front from Tropo if you configure it a certain way. But yeah, it's nothing more complicated than that.
Nobody's done something later on? Because
Not that I
it
know
does
of.
seem kind of low level for a larger system.
Yeah, well, like I said, I had read a lot of code. So I want to show you this. So these are actually just pieces from my coached app, one of my coached apps. Actually, it's not even fair to say. Like I said, I have one application that acts as the sort of the Tropo proxy, and so in that app, one of the things that you get from the Tropo Ruby Web API is this thing called the Tropo generator. Now, I had decided early on that I was going to have really fancy messages with like footers that said, press question mark for help and what have you. I ended up not using that, but this is just me subclassing the Tropo generator and overriding some of these methods to optionally add footers. So you're obviously free to do that, but this is not part of Tropo. This is this is something that I did. And then to sort of enhance, I think I'll be all right. There's not much more, but thank you. So this is my sort of base controller for this app, and I have the REST client so that when I do my outbound calls, that's what I'm using to make the HTTP call. This is the Ruby library for Tropo. So that's where the generator comes from. Oops.
Can you give us a general overview of what you use Tropo for in Coach? What would be a scenario if somebody
Sure.
gets things?
We have an app basically where you can give us a cell phone number and we will send you messages throughout the day that encourage you to exercise. Now that's not super interactive, that's almost all one way. But we also have the ability to set up an arbitrary I basically built a decision tree, so you can have an arbitrary conversation, right? So with Tropo, I can basically say, hello, we're going to start the, whatever. And then if you respond yes or no, then I basically can configure questions. I'll show it to you. Hang on. So it's a lot easier to see than it is to talk about. So, but I did just want to sort of mention a couple things here. Hang up, I just added say goodbye before you hang up, unless you tell it to be silent. Input, so this is what I was talking about when I said, I literally have to look at what I get back from Tropo, and if it's a session, then I know I need to grab this, and otherwise, it's just, I have to grab this. But this is like the input, this is like effectively the answer to a question. So, this is just something I wrote so I didn't have to deal with the fact that their API is not as consistent as I would like it to be. Same thing with the session ID. So depending on what I get, and it's a drag, right? Because I only get a Tropo session once. Like a session is sort of, it's defining the new session, and then you just do the session, right? So that's what this is. This is the sort of app level. So this is using this is inheriting from that previous controller. And this is using a lot of that stuff offhand. So, so this start is the, so that start is the endpoint for any of my coach apps.
How many Coach apps are there?
3. All right, I'm gonna wait for that. So anyway, basically, this action through a URL is mapped to a Tropo application. So it comes in, and I've got it so that it'll handle whether it's an outbound call or not. So the way that I know that it's an outbound call is I have to look at the session and see that it's saying, oh, it's got an action and it says create. If it's an outbound call, then I need to know if it's a one-off message, so this will handle one-off message. If it's not a message, then it's a question, okay? And then this sets that up. And I've got a bunch of stuff in here. I'm basically storing all this stuff as well, so I can look at it later. If it's not an outbound message, then it's an inbound message. And because I know that on text, I don't care about that first answer, I throw it away, like I said before. And then basically, my continue is this process answer URL, which of course ends up mapping to this process answer method. And then this basically, what happens is the clients they basically instruct the bot what the next thing to ask is. So you know, so for a given application, I ask a question, the person says something, the Tropo client application says, oh, when you say yes, I'm supposed to ask you this. So then it turns around and it says, Tropo, please ask them this. So this thing is completely stupid, right? Like it just talks to Tropo and sends messages and receives responses. But that's it. So this is, you know, there's basically like the initial endpoint, and then this thing handles a conversation until such time as I detect that the conversation's over. And then that's it. So, so what I wanted to show you with this that uses this, so this is, so here's the questions. How fast is it gonna be? Did this go away? No. Yeah, that's taking forever. Again, this isn't really Tropo. This is stuff I built on top of Tropo. So, but this is just for this app is really simple, right? So, but basically the idea is that I have a notion of a question, then I have that set up as a tree, so questions have children, and basically you can build a decision tree of questions, and then depending on the answer you get, you make the decision about how to go. But what I wanted to show you with this, so this is just this is both a toy and actually something potentially very useful, right? So, you know, I could use this to basically send messages to anyone, either voice or text. So if I get a situation where, you know, we get like 20 customers tomorrow and they all, like for some reason I need to fix something real quick, you know, you could use this for that, or you could use it to generally harass people. So
That's what I was thinking.
does anybody want to volunteer to be harassed or no? Probably not. Everybody seems really
What's
scared.
their
You can harass me.
What's that? What's your number?
713
Yeah.
397 2814.
You gonna send them a voice or something?
I can. Let me do a voice.
It's Jesse though, but
Oh,
Yeah.
who's
Yeah.
How do I? I'm sorry,
Who's
Jason.
Now you are named Jason.
Hey, look, now you know he's lying about your shirt too. He hates my shirt. Wes, that's why you have no friends.
Well, he pays me to be his friend.
You pays you too?
That's
Yeah.
good. So
That's
there
why
you
I'm
go.
here.
Let's do Chris's stuff. Christoph.
Is it gonna
Okay,
translate
the
to
Polish
Polish,
now.
or it's just
No,
gonna
it's not
stay
gonna
in
translate
English?
to Polish.
Hey, I'm.
It's always gonna turn out bad.
Wait, that's not.
I'm sorry, Jesse. That's
I'm
terrible.
okay with
Did you send something? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure he's supposed to back there.
it. No,
Oh, there you go.
Did it do it?
that's the speaker, but okay.
They did call you.
It did call me. It did say something. I did hear a guy in Polish.
And what happens if it's busy or no answer? Does it know how to talk to the answering machines and leave messages?
Oh, yeah, so that's a good.
I know
question.
you did say
So-
something about his mother.
What's that?
Send me when you get a
How do we
chance.
know we didn't say something about his mother?
Address.
Just
All right,
don't
do
know.
you want to call or do you want SMS? Let me do
No, I wanna call.
You want to call?
We go back, I wanna call.
That's pretty cool.
What do you want?
Well, call me Jason, and tell her I have a nice shirt.
We want French female.
Oh,
Florence.
so,
What's your number
so I get
21
Polish
now?
mail.
No,
He gets a
no.
French female calling her.
Something
My
439
439.
4391075.
Yep.
I remember the last four digits of your phone number, very useful.
I'm gonna say Scheveningen.
Name's Jason. Talk
Your
about my
name
shirt.
should be Jason.
An R in it.
My last name's Richardson, so I never do. Okay.
I'll try to do speakerphone.
And then I am storing these messages, so I basically built a list box over here of all the messages I ever sent. So if you had stock things that you would want, it would just populate that.
Hello, Western.
Yeah. Luckily, there's no filthy messages in here, which is pretty strong.
Okay, she's ringing. You don't hear these.
Because the first thing I used this for was to send filthy messages.
Yeah, I got one of those.
Show the answer, see if it'll store.
That's cool.
Yeah, but she said it's,
And then she hung up on my